About 125 million years ago, in what's now northwestern China, life suddenly came to a standstill. Animals were going about their usual routines, eating, resting, even fighting, when without warning, everything froze. Their bodies, perfectly preserved under layers of rock and ash, remained hidden for millions of years until scientists began to uncover the mystery. Since the 1990s, paleontologists digging in Lujiatun, Liaoning Province, have found complete skeletons of ancient creatures, many appearing as if they were caught mid-movement, frozen in time. A small meat-eating troodontid was discovered with its neck curled like a sleeping bird. Nearby, early hadrosaurs were found lying peacefully with their stiff tails stretched behind them. These fossils weren't broken or scattered, they were intact, as if gently laid to rest under a protective layer of ash. But not every creature met a peaceful end. What kind of event could freeze an entire ecosystem in place? Today, we're diving into the mystery of the Cretaceous Pompeii. In 2023, researchers stumbled upon a fossil that told a much more violent story. It showed two animals locked in a deadly battle. Pacificosaurus, a small beaked dinosaur with bristle-like structures on its tail, and Repenomamus, a mammal about the size of a modern-day weasel. The mammal's claws were wrapped tightly around the dinosaur's jaw, and its teeth were sunk deep into the ribs of its prey. The two were frozen in mid-fight, buried together as they struggled for life. It's rare to find such a vivid moment preserved so perfectly. This wasn't just bones, it was a snapshot of behavior, a glimpse into how these animals interacted, fought, and survived. Fossils like these are more than just ancient remains. They give us clues about how these creatures lived their daily lives, how they hunted, how they moved, and even how they rested. The discovery site in Lujiatun has drawn comparisons to another place, famous for preserving life in its final moments, Pompeii. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a volcanic eruption buried the Roman city under a thick layer of ash, freezing people and animals in time just like in Lujiatun. But while these two places might seem to share a similar fate, the details suggest their stories might have unfolded in very different ways. In both Pompeii and Lujiatun, life was captured as if time had stopped. People in Pompeii were found in the middle of their daily routines, some cooking, some sleeping, and others trying to flee. The animals in Lujiatun were preserved much the same way, appearing as if they were caught off guard, with no signs of struggle or panic. But here's the strange part. If an eruption was fast enough to surprise them, wouldn't it also have tossed their bodies around, leaving them in chaotic heaps? And if it was slow enough to leave their bodies undisturbed, wouldn't they have seen it coming and tried to escape? The fact that these animals and people were preserved so perfectly suggests that whatever happened was both sudden and gentle, a rare combination. And that's where things get interesting. The story of Lujiatun begins with the shifting of the Earth itself. Around the time these animals were alive, the land we now call China was being pulled apart. To the east, the Pacific Plate was forming, and the movement of these massive pieces of Earth's crust created a lot of stress and tension. The once stable land began to crack, forming deep valleys and sparking the rise of volcanoes, lots of them. These volcanoes were similar to Mount Vesuvius, the one that buried Pompeii. Both produced magma rich in dissolved gases and thick with silica, making them prone to explosive eruptions rather than slow, oozing lava flows. When these volcanoes blew, they didn't just spew lava. They sent clouds of superheated ash and gas racing down the mountainsides in deadly waves known as pyroclastic flows. A pyroclastic flow can move faster than 100 kilometers per hour, burning everything in its path and traveling many kilometers from the eruption site. This is exactly the kind of event that buried Pompeii, where people and animals were instantly killed by the intense heat before being covered in ash. But in Lujiatun, the evidence suggests something a little different. The rock layers in Lujiatun show signs that they were part of a pyroclastic flow, but with a twist. The ash and debris seem to have been disturbed after they were first laid down, as if the material had been picked up and moved again. The layers aren't as neatly stacked as you'd expect from a simple volcanic flow. So what caused this reshuffling? One possibility is that the pyroclastic flow collided with a river, mixing water with ash and turning the flow into something even more dangerous. Or maybe the eruption happened under a glacier, with melting ice adding to the chaos. Another theory is that heavy rains hit the loose volcanic ash after the eruption, triggering a powerful mudslide. This kind of volcanic mudslide is called a lahar, and it's just as deadly as a pyroclastic flow. Lahars can be scorching hot or freezing cold, depending on how they form, and in steep areas, they can rush downhill at speeds over 200 kilometers per hour. They move like wet concrete, thick and heavy, carrying rocks, trees, and anything else in their path. And unlike a fast-moving pyroclastic flow, a lahar can blanket an area more slowly, burying everything beneath it without necessarily disturbing the bodies of the creatures it covers. This might explain why the fossils at Lujiatun look so peaceful. The animals could have been killed quickly by toxic gases or ash from the initial eruption, and then their bodies were buried gently by a lahar that followed. The volcanic mud would have sealed them in place, preserving even the most delicate creatures for millions of years. In contrast, Pompeii's residents faced a different kind of horror. The pyroclastic flow that hit the city was so hot and so fast that it instantly killed people where they stood, but the force of the eruption left their bodies where they fell. The ash hardened around them, capturing their final moments in heartbreaking detail. But here's where things start to differ between Pompeii and Lujiatun. While both sites froze life in its tracks, the way they did it and the clues left behind tell two very different stories. Pyroclastic flows, like the one that buried Pompeii, change as they move. When Mount Vesuvius erupted, the fiery cloud of gas and ash rushed down the mountainside toward Pompeii, which was about 8 kilometers away. By the time it reached the town, the flow had lost some of its deadly weight and thickness. It became lighter, almost like a fluffy cloud of hot ash. This strange balance allowed it to be fast and hot enough to kill people instantly, but light enough that it didn't toss their bodies around. The result? People were left in lifelike poses, sitting, walking, and even sleeping, frozen forever in their final moments. Now compare that to lahars, the volcanic mud flows suspected at Lujiatun. Lahars are much thicker than pyroclastic ash clouds. They're often described as moving rivers of concrete. And here's the tricky part. While lahars can slow down and become more liquid as they move, they're still heavy enough to drag, bury, and even shove everything in their path. A lahar that moved fast enough to catch and kill dinosaurs without giving them time to react would also have been strong enough to toss their bodies downstream. But that's not what we see in Lujiatun. Many of the dinosaurs appear undisturbed, lying peacefully as if they never knew what hit them. So, if a lahar did sweep through Lujiatun, it's only part of the story. What's even more puzzling is how quickly both the people of Pompeii and the dinosaurs of Lujiatun were preserved. It's like the Earth took a snapshot, locking them in time. But how exactly did that happen? The answer might be hidden in how their bodies were positioned when they were found. In Pompeii, the story is a bit clearer. People were awakened when disaster struck. The eruption happened in the morning, and about 70% of the townspeople were found in positions that looked like their normal activities, walking through the streets, sitting in their homes, or even trying to crawl away. But there were small, eerie details in how their bodies were posed. For example, around 64% of the bodies had bent arms and clenched fingers. At first, scientists thought this meant people were trying to shield themselves from the ash. But later research showed that it was actually something called the pugilistic attitude. This happens when muscles and tendons contract after being exposed to intense heat, like a human body being cooked in an instant. The pyroclastic flow that hit Pompeii wasn't just fast, it was unbelievably hot. The extreme heat killed people almost immediately, causing their bodies to tighten up in these unnatural poses. Then, as the ash and rocks from the ongoing eruption settled around them, their bodies were encased in layers of sediment, eventually burying the town under about 7 meters of volcanic debris. But when scientists looked at the dinosaurs in Lujiatun, they didn't see the same signs. None of the fossilized dinosaurs showed pugilistic postures or any sign they'd reacted to their burial. It was like they had fallen asleep and never woken up. This led some researchers to think that maybe these dinosaurs had been in burrows when disaster struck. Perhaps the roofs of their burrows collapsed during an eruption, instantly trapping and killing them. But even that theory doesn't explain everything. Take for example one heartbreaking fossil, a group of 24 young Prehistoric dinosaurs. Their bodies are slightly rotated, as if they'd been gently pushed by a weak current. But that kind of movement would have been hard to achieve if they were buried inside a burrow. This suggests something else, a lahar perhaps. And then there's the fossil of the Repenomamus, the small mammal caught mid-attack on its dinosaur prey. Its back leg is trapped beneath the bent knee of the Prehistoric, hinting that the two bodies were shifted slightly by a current before they were finally buried. But even with these signs of movement, none of the sleeping dinosaurs show any evidence of waking up or trying to escape. And the Repenomamus? It seemed to be thoroughly enjoying its last meal, completely unaware of the impending doom. So how did all these animals get caught off guard? One possible explanation is that they were already dead before the lahar hit. See, volcanoes don't always need ash and lava to be deadly. Sometimes they release clouds of pure gas, especially carbon dioxide. CO2 is odorless, invisible, and normally harmless in small amounts. But when a volcano releases it in large quantities, it becomes a silent killer. CO2 is heavier than air, so it sinks close to the ground, filling low-lying areas like valleys or burrows. At high enough concentrations, it can cause animals to lose consciousness in seconds, and death follows almost immediately. Some scientists believe that CO2 might have been the invisible killer at Lujiatun. These dinosaurs could have been sleeping or resting when a cloud of gas swept through the area. They would have had no warning, no time to wake up or react. Within moments, they were dead. And then, before their bodies could decompose or be scavenged, a slow-moving lahar came through and sealed them in place, preserving their peaceful postures for millions of years. Today, paleontologists continue to dig in Lujiatun, uncovering more fossils and piecing together the mystery. But there's a challenge. Many of these fossils aren't first discovered by scientists. They're often found by local farmers or villagers, who dig them up before the experts arrive. This makes it harder to know exactly which layers of rock the fossils came from, and that complicates efforts to understand the exact sequence of events. Luckily, after the fossils are dug up, they often still have bits of the original sediment clinging to them. By studying this sediment, scientists discovered that the sleeping dinosaurs didn't all come from the same spot, or even the same volcanic event. This suggests that Lujiatun might have experienced multiple eruptions, with similar deadly gas and lahar combinations happening more than once. The conditions that preserve behavior in the fossil record are rare. But Lujiatun seems to have been the perfect storm, a unique blend of volcanic activity that captured life in a way few other places have. And while Pompeii and Lujiatun might have experienced different geological events, both offer us an extraordinary glimpse into ancient lives frozen in time. If you enjoyed diving into this prehistoric mystery, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe for more fascinating stories from ancient past. Oh, and do hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.